Hi, and welcome to a special Massive Resistance episode of Ends Division. I'm Glenn Reynolds. Well, we have, the era of massive resistance we usually think of as something in the 50s and the 60s when schools that have been engaged in race-based segregation fought efforts to get them to let in people of different races. Now we've got a different kind of massive resistance as states try to ban race-conscious affirmative action and schools engage in all kinds of subterfuges and schemes to avoid complying. An expert on this is here with us today, Tim Groseclose. He's a professor of economics and political science at UCLA. His new book is Cheating, an insider's report on the use of race in admissions at UCLA. Well, it's just kind of devastating, really. Welcome, Tim.
Thanks. Great to be here.
So lots of universities have race-based admissions policies. What's the big deal at UCLA?
Prop 209. It's legal. Well, it's questionably legal at private universities, but it's clear that it is illegal at all public universities in California because of Prop 209, a provision of the California Constitution passed by voters in 1996 says you cannot use race in admissions at public universities.
And so you started looking into how the admissions were working at UCLA, and they kind of stonewalled you for a while.
That's right.
Well, tell us what happened.
Well, the key thing is from 2005 to 2008, I was on the faculty oversight committee for admissions. And during my tenure there, I saw some irregularities. I'm happy to go into some of those irregularities. But near the end of my term, spring 2008, I asked for 1,000 random admission files. Just said I wanted to do some statistical analysis. This is what I do in my research. I was basically a statistics major as an undergrad and just wanted to do some analysis, and they refused. And so that's when I started becoming suspicious that something's going on. And
what did you find out? What are they doing?
Okay, well, since then, with the help of a colleague at UCLA Law School, his name's Richard Sander, we did a Public Records Act request. The federal government has the Freedom of Information Act. California government has the Public Records Act. We at first, UCLA balked, but eventually they gave us the data we'd asked for. I looked through that, saw some smoking guns. The other thing that happened, maybe even more important, is when I resigned in protest from that faculty oversight committee, UCLA, I think to deflect attention away from my resignation, they said, well, we need to have something like the equivalent of a blue ribbon commission. And so they hired a sociologist at UCLA. His name's Robert Mayer, and they said, well, he'll be the independent investigator to study these things. And he was supposed to finish his report in a year. It took 4, but UCLA delayed it a year. But once they released it, it turns out this Professor Mayer did an honest job. And at least in his statistical analysis, you can see it. There are several smoking guns that show that, for instance, one of his analysis estimates that approximately 34% of all African Americans admitted at UCLA would not have been admitted if it weren't for the racial preferences. He also found that among Asian Americans that their numbers are too low, that there's actually been some discrimination against Asian Americans, and if it weren't for the discrimination, their numbers would be about 9% higher.
Yeah, what's the reaction been to your book from the administration, voters, parents, the state? What's happening in response to this? Are they going to clean up their act?
Not much. The mainstream media, I've been kind of disappointed. I thought there'd be at least some mainstream media. It's still kind of early. Maybe they'll pick it up. But almost no response from the mainstream media. UCLA, I know, knows about it because to get this data, for instance, I had to meet with the chief lawyer at UCLA. His name's Kevin Reed, and I sent him an email and said, if you like, I'll send you a free copy of my book. And he said, oh, I just ordered it on Amazon yesterday. And I'm somewhat friends with Professor Mayer and offered him a book. The same thing. He said, I've actually already ordered it. So I know UCLA knows about this book. So that's been but they've had no response at all. And I think that's what I would do if I were them. So far it's been kind of this hidden topic, only kind of in the conservative blogosphere, Fox News, Instapundit, and if UCLA responded, that might just draw attention to what I'm doing. So they haven't responded. One of the most pleasant surprises I've seen, and this is due a lot to my colleague Richard Sander, the law school professor at UCLA. He actually talked to some of the Asian groups who were instrumental in defeating SCA 5. Now, this was a bill in the California legislature that was going to overturn Prop 209. And a bunch of these Asian groups got together and said, this is wrong. We see what's going to happen to us. Our students are going to get fewer slots in University of California. Rick Sander organized a group, a big meeting with something like a dozen leaders of these groups, and I gave a little presentation. I gave another presentation. One of them invited me to one of their student groups, met with parents, and I'm about to give one again this Sunday. And Professor Sander is working very hard on helping to organize potentially a lawsuit, and I think this could come. Pacific Legal Foundation has indicated they'll probably help out, and the key now is trying to get some plaintiffs. And according to Rick Sander, he says that it looks like we have quite a few.
Well, you shouldn't have a lot of trouble. I mean, one of the interesting things about this is, I think for a lot of people, especially a lot of sort of old-fashioned, race liberals, the paradigm is that you've got this, affirmative action is this sort of benevolent white majority giving some goodies to the oppressed black minority to make up for how they were treated in the past. But in fact, what's happening is, well, there's not, especially in California, the benign white majority, it's not much of a majority anymore. And the other thing is, what it's actually giving away is something that belongs to somebody else. That is, they're basically taking slots from Asians and giving them to blacks. Right. And that's just sort of a naked transfer of wealth, if you will, on racial grounds. And certainly not to make up for past oppression, because most of these Asian immigrants weren't even here. So it really it's just a naked transfer of wealth on racial grounds. And that seems to me to be pretty vulnerable to litigation, since, it's against the law and probably violates the U.S. Constitution, too.
Right. Right. A few facts I think are very important that I've discovered. Well, one that I think a lot of people know, that whites are a minority at UCLA. They make up something like 27% of the freshman enrollment. Asians are actually a little higher. There's something like 35 or 40%. That's one fact. Another fact that's interesting, at least by this report by Professor Merritt, and the internal report at UCLA, it finds that although lots of people say, well, you need to use some racial preferences for underrepresented minorities, and by that they mean African Americans and Latinos. Turns out there's almost no racial preferences by Latinos. That's what Professor Merritt found. So that's really not an issue. The other thing that's very interesting about this, and this is what I found from my data that I got from UCLA. By the way, I've posted that data to my own website. Anyone can verify these facts. But it turns out that one of the most socioeconomically disadvantaged groups is Southeast Asians. So lots of people think socioeconomic disadvantage, they think African Americans, but it turns out there's actually three groups that are basically tied at UCLA: African Americans, Latinos, and Southeast Asians. And when I was a member of that faculty oversight committee, I was privy to a few more reports. I got it broken down by different groups within the Southeast Asians, and it turns out the Vietnamese are basically the most socioeconomically disadvantaged of all the groups. So when you talk about wanting to help people, it should through racial preferences, it should be the Vietnamese, but that's not what's going on at all.
Yeah, it's very interesting to me. I mean, there's clearly a lot of stuff going on with diversity in higher education is almost a religion now. And as a religion, it's kind of immune to a lot of rational analysis, such as like, well, who are you trying to help, the least advantaged people? No, not particularly. What do you think all this, and also the university's willingness to basically break the law in kind of an underhanded fashion, says about the place of affirmative action in the academy today?
It's just huge. It is something like religion in the academy. I just talked to a friend of mine who applied to a deanship at one of the UC schools. I won't mention his name or the school, but he made it to the round of something like 12 or so, and not quite to the round where they had to fly out to the campus, but in this round or 12, they had one question. It said, what would you do to increase diversity? This is at a UC school, when you cannot use race explicitly. You mentioned the large-scale breaking of the law. That is happening. I talked to almost any of my colleagues, I'll say diversity is just so important that we must break the law if that's what it takes to do it. Now, I would argue the problem, they would call it civil disobedience. Now, I would say the problem with that is you're doing the civil disobedience in the dark. And if you read, say, Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail, he does not advocate that. He says a notion of self-purification. Everyone that in his group that was doing the civil disobedience had to be willing to go to jail, and that's just not true at all with the professoriate and the staff members in the admissions group.
Yeah, I also kind of question whether it's possible to engage in civil disobedience while wielding government power, which is, of course, what you do when you decide who to admit somebody to a university.
Yes.
I think that's kind of self-serving, but it is very interesting. I plan to stay tuned and see how this goes. I've been noting more and more lawsuits against universities on a wide variety of grounds are succeeding. You've got male students who've been wrongly accused of sexual assault suing under Title IX. I just saw Mike Adams at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, denied promotion because he became a vocal Christian, won not only retroactive promotion and back pay, but also $700,000 in legal fees. I can't help but feel that as the higher education industry in general kind of looks worse in the public eye, and also with all these hungry lawyers out there looking for work, that they're going to become a very attractive, deep-pocketed plaintiff in a way that I think most university administrators aren't really used to being. And I think that's going to produce a lot more litigation that people who are used to ignoring the law, basically doing what they wanted without consequences, are going to find quite a surprise.
All right, I agree with you. I think that shock's around the corner. The same group that filed the lawsuit in the Fisher case for the University of Texas is now trying to get plaintiffs to file a lawsuit against Harvard. Now, I said that it's not clear whether using affirmative action at private universities is legal. Lots of lawyers I've talked to said, no, there's some Civil Rights Act passed in the 1960s that says that if you get government funds, that you cannot use affirmative action. And the private schools have been almost upfront about this. And if things go right, there could be in the near future a lawsuit against Harvard. And it looks like Harvard could lose such a lawsuit.
Well, it's going to be very interesting to see. And of course, just as a general feature, I'm in favor of anything that enriches lawyers. But here I think that it's a case where we certainly can't rely on the Department of Justice or the Department of Education to do anything about this. So I think we're going to have to rely on those private attorneys general to do their job, and it looks like that's ramping up. Thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
Thank you, Glenn.
That was Tim Groseclose. He's a professor of economics and political science at UCLA. His new book is Cheating, an insider's report on the use of race in admissions at UCLA. And thanks to all of you for tuning in here on InstaVision, where we never discriminate on the basis of race. We're open to everyone on equal terms. We'll be back soon. In the meantime, have fun on the internet. Thanks.